Bridging the US Broadband Divide Dashboard is an interactive tool aimed at helping policymakers and practitioners understand the nature of the digital divide in communities across the United States. With the passing of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in November 2021, the US government earmarked $65 billion for broadband internet, the largest outlay for broadband to date. The dashboard is a tool for practitioners to use for planning out how to best allocate this new infusion of funding. For advocates and the general public, it offers a transparent view into the dynamics of the digital divide across communities in the United States. Let's begin using the dashboard. First, each dot represents a zip code in the United States. On the y-axis, we have the average download speed, a measure of the quality of internet access. The broadband speed in a location determines whether that area is considered served, unserved, or underserved, and thus where it stands in line for funding the infrastructure law. On the x-axis, we have the percentage of the population that can afford the cheapest broadband plan. We use the global standard, 2% of income spent on broadband, as the metric here. Dots further to the right of the chart represent wealthier zip codes where most households can afford broadband. The dots further left represent zip codes where fewer people can afford to pay for broadband. For example, 10075 is a zip code in the Upper East Side in New York City, a wealthier area, where 92% of the population can afford broadband. On the opposite side, you have 10453 in the Bronx, where speeds are high, but only 55% of the area can afford a broadband plan. At the top of the dashboard, you can select your city or state of interest. Let's use Georgia to explore more functions and generate some insights. The dots or zip codes are sized based on the population density of that zip code. Let's check out this large dot. Hover your mouse over any dot to pull up the zip code, the location, and additional information. This dot represents the 30363 zip code in Atlanta, the Atlantic Station neighborhood. We know it's a more dense urban area given its size. The color of each dot tells us the percentage of the population that is white. The bluer the dot, the whiter the community. In this case, we can see that the light orange color is just to the left of the median. Note where the dotted vertical median line lies. This is the median affordability line for Georgia. It's to the left of the national average, suggesting that Georgians face more affordability challenges in accessing broadband than the average American. 79% of households in Atlantic Station can afford the cheapest broadband plan. 21% face an affordability issue. We can also see that the average download speed in this community is 32.4 megabits per second. A quick note on speeds. The current FCC standard considers 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload speed as adequate, though the chair of the FCC herself called that standard behind the times. And the Commission is proposing a new standard of 100 megabits per second by 20 megabits per second. Most experts agree that the 100 megabits per second standard, what we have labeled as sufficient broadband speed, is the better metric, as our online activities like streaming and teleconferencing use up more bandwidth. However, that 25 megabits per second line is important as it's the distinction between unserved and underserved. Back to our chart. Atlantic Station at around 32 megabits per second is above the current standard for speeds, but like much of the rest of the country, far below the speed needed for a family of 4 to learn, work, and entertain themselves seamlessly at home. As such, it's considered underserved and second in line for funding to increase internet speed and expand access. The small dots in the unserved section of the chart are first in line for the funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. As you can see from the tiny dots in the unserved area and the larger dots in the underserved area, the law is putting more rural, less population dense areas first. In other words, they're prioritizing miles over people. You can also see this dynamic by switching to the map view. The red areas are first in line and the yellow areas are second. The green areas currently have sufficient speeds. If states have access to other funding streams without these restrictions, they may want to use those resources to reach the population dense areas that are just above the unserved, underserved barrier, like our Atlanta neighborhood here. Now that we understand how to interpret the dynamics of dots based on speed or quality of access, let's dive into the affordability challenge in Georgia. The further the dots are to the left, the greater the affordability challenge in that zip code. Most of the dots in the unserved portion of the chart also have 20% more of their population unable to afford broadband in their community. Part of the infrastructure law, the Affordable Connectivity Program, will help many of these households. Outreach and awareness raising activities should be focused on these areas first. Below the chart is a handy table with the top line numbers at national, state, and city level. You can also download a more detailed data set from our site. If you'd like to share the chart you've created or embed it on your own page, click the share button in the bottom right. We look forward to seeing how you use this dashboard to help bridge the broadband divide in your community.